Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Azar of Chess channel, and welcome to our French defense series. So, in this series, I'm going to show you good ways and good opening lines in order to beat, first of all, the French defense. So, we're continuing now with our series, the King's Indian against the French defense. And as I mentioned in my previous video of the series, we'll also continue this opening, this French defense, also from Black's perspective, but also from White's perspective in different lines. For instance, like the exchange variation, the whenever variation, many of these great sidelines that can happen to you in this very tricky opening. But as I said, today we'll continue our French defense series from White's perspective. So this is my suggestion how you should play against the French defense, how you should play in a more effective way, I think in a more dynamic way, in order really to get out of this positional threats that basically can happen in the French defense. So today we're continuing the so-called King's Indian attack. In my previous video, I've analyzed these other possibilities when we have this dynamic center positions. So in order to maybe get a better understanding of this particular video, you should also watch my previous video of the series. So in order really to have this grip, how to play really this King's Indian attack against the French defense. So today we'll do the French defense with the King's Indian attack and the exchange variation in the center. I'll show you what's all about and what are the basic strategical elements and main planning ideas in the middle game in this particular line. So e4 is of course our first move. E6 the response by Black, the French defense, and as I recommended in my previous video, we are going into a King's Indian attack with the move d3. This is, as I said, my suggestion. You can use it, you don't have to if you don't like these setups. Bobby Fischer used to play really often the King's Indian attack against the French defense, so maybe it's even good for you. So d5 is now Black's choice to break the center immediately, and my recommendation is now to proceed with the move queen to e2, which I've also analyzed in my previous video. So now comes the different move. It's d takes e4. After d takes e4, today we'll analyze the position after the move e5, and here I really want you to stop already, because it seems that basically nothing special is going on in this particular game, that we have a static center, but we can really tell so many things about this position already. First of all, we have now this static center setup, so it means from a strategical and planning point of view, our main goal is, from White's perspective, to occupy the d5 and f5 square. So, for instance, if we could maneuver a knight here on f5, or maybe another knight from c3 to d5, this would be a very nice outpost. Of course, it's hard to make that happen because your opponent could always try c6 and g6 moves in order to kick it away. But as a plan, that's our goal, sort of, because in chess we have a long-term plan. Then of course we are trying some other moves, but basically the plan stays. The plan can always happen maybe in a later stage of the game. Maybe in move 30 we make our outpost on d5. So that's really the rule of the static center setups. Whenever you see that these pawns in the center are static, so you cannot move them further, really, then it's time to search for this outpost on these two squares. Of course, Black will try to cover here this d4 and your f4 square, so you have to be also careful. So c3 is always a possibility, and maybe a g3 in order to kick your opponent's ability to play this very nice outpost. What we also can immediately say about this position is the potential trades of bishops. If we evaluate now this pawn structure by a bishop's activity, we can say that this bishop, in long terms of course, would be sometimes blocked out by its own pawn. So maybe if we could just imagine this position without the light square bishops on the board, because Black's light square bishop is much more active because he has of course the central pawn on the dark square. So you see this bishop has a good activity. Even if we move here the queen from this light square, still this bishop could maybe have a good activity on c4, but from an endgame's perspective, you don't want to have so many pawns on light squares when you have the light square bishop. So maybe in long terms, of course, as a strategical plan, we should go into favorable trades of pieces, maybe trade off this light square bishops and then continue our game with a very nice dark square bishop. On the other hand, sometimes Black could have troubles, maybe if Black for instance, plays a passive move like bishop to d6, then this bishop would be blocked out and will be only a part of a pawn chain. So as I said, static center outposts on this supported square, so it means on d5, f5, and positional trades of pieces. These are the strategical elements. The first instructive game in this particular position is a game played by Alexander Morozevich against Askar Kanatov. Here, Alexander Morozevich played, I think, in history very often this queen to e2 idea. In the game, knight to f3, attacking. We have really, I think, it seems like a Rui Lopez sort of game, similar to the Rui Lopez now, but we have now an improved position of the Rui Lopez because we have now already developed queen and now we have a developed knight. So we have developed two minor pieces. In the common Rui Lopez, we have only developed one piece. So here knight to c6 and now c3. Very important move, as I mentioned. Restricting this d4 square. If something jumps on d4, this could be really dangerous. Then maybe after e takes d4, your opponent could connect the pawns here with c5, could create maybe a pawn storm if you allow him to jump on this d4 square. So that's why c3 a necessary move. a5. Now we have queen to c2 by Morozevich, and now bishop to d6. Now bishop to b5, very important move to get our bishop active, because as I said, here you see already black has these problems of the dark square bishop, because as I said, it's only used as a part of the pawn chain. Now it's time to activate our sort of bad bishop. It's not really a bad bishop, but as I mentioned, we have this central pawn on light square, so we have to secure an activity of this light square bishop. So keep that in mind when you have the static center. I'm repeating myself, but believe me, most of these chess games are won by simple strategical elements, by these tiny little things in strategy. Here bishop to b5 and now bishop to d7. We have knight to d2. Even if this knight jumps somehow, maybe here on e7, we would love to give up our light square bishop for this light square bishop. As I said, don't be threatened by potential trades of light square bishop, because as I said, if we evaluate now this bishop's activity, of course, after potential knight to c4, this bishop would be perfectly fine. As I mentioned, this bishop on d6 is only a defensive piece. So knight to f6, we have now this move knight to c4, attacking also this e4 pawn. Most of the times in this setups, in this line of the French defense, you should also try to attack somehow these weaknesses. This pawn could be also long-term weakness. In the game, queen to e7 and now bishop to g5. So you see, Alexander Morozevich has here really a great activity. Here he has again this sort of a positional pin in which he waits this knight to jump somewhere and simply trade off the light square bishop. So h6, not a problem. Bishop to h4, retreating, castling, and now a4, cementing the positional light squares. We have a g5. Okay, this is a move which kicks away the bishop, but you don't want to really have so many pawns on dark squares as you have here yourself a dark square bishop. So here bishop to g3, bishop to g4, not a problem. Now we have bishop takes c6. You see Morozevich gave up finally. Now his light square bishop, bishop takes f3, g takes f3, not a problem, but now knight to e3. And this, as I said, was the main strategy. Now we got our goal. We have, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, now this perfect weak square for the knight on f5. When you see black doesn't have anymore the light square bishop, cannot attack this knight on f5. Still, if this knight attacks the bishop, we would love to give up maybe our bishop for this knight, because our bishop is blocked out anyway. But now this square on f5 is basically unprotectable. So in the game, queen to e6, knight to f5, knight to h5 was played, and now h4. Very nice move by Alexander Morozevich, trying to open the position. Still, what we can even stay with the king in the center, because basically we can stay in the king in this, with the king in the center when the center cannot be opened. So because of the static center that I mentioned before, the idea is, of course, that no pawn breakthrough are possible in the center, so your king is perfectly fine. Even if uh, black jumps with the knight on f4, we would of course take it in immediately, and then h takes g5, and would have a perfect open h file, and still this h6 weakness is simply too much to handle. Knight to g7 was played, and after h takes g5, Alexander Morozevich, opponent, even resigned. So what can you do? Maybe knight takes f5, here e takes f5, you have to move the queen, and rook takes h6 wins the game. So you see, many things we can say immediately after trades of pawns. D takes e4, e5, static center, bishop's activity. Which bishop should we use? As I said, we have the pawn on a light square, so probably the dark square bishop is much more powerful. Static center setups, of course, as I mentioned, outpost, 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 d5, f5 possibilities. So let's see now another example. It's a game played by Hisham Hamdoushi against Ruslan Pogorelov. Here again, this French defense setup, d3, d5, queen to e2. Recommendation, as I said, tried out sometimes. Tried maybe out in some blitz games, then you maybe will have good success, and then you can really analyze this King's Indian attack against the French defense even more, and even try more sidelines. So after d takes e4, we have again e5, knight to f3. A pinning idea, you may get annoyed by the pinning idea. It's not a problem, because black cannot play on the spinning idea immediately. It's very, very risky, because this queen to b5 immediately wins the game after, I think, queen takes b7. So that's why it's not so easy for black to develop this light square bishop in an early stage of the game. Knight to d2, knight to d7 was played, and now knight to d2. Again, with the same idea. Knight to c4, knight to e3, and then knight to f5 or knight to d5. So this is the path of the knight. What you shouldn't do in this opening is to play knight to c3, because then you get probably the spinning idea by black, because black will get rid of this sort of bad bishop. As I mentioned, it's really not a bad bishop, but it could have troubles in the continuation of the game. So after bishop to b4, basically you're forced to give up your knight. You have always this pin, and you cannot play this move c3 in order to prevent this this outpost on d4. So be careful. Knight to d2. If now bishop to b4 happens, then we have c3 with a very nice tempo. So in the game, a knight to f6, we have knight to c4, attacking this pawn twice on e5. As I said, it's similar also to the Perth defense. I'm sure that Perth defense players are familiar with these setups, but of course the Perth defense is played from black's perspective. And now comes a very important move, c6, also restricting d5. The problem is you cannot take immediately. Knight takes e5, after knight takes e5, knight takes e5, queen to a5 wins the piece here on e5, so it's not a possibility. Bishop to d7, d2 played by white. Here bishop to c5, we have knight takes e5 finally, and now after knight takes e5, knight takes queen to e7. Seems like a dangerous move, but now knight to d3, simplifying the position. After a trade of pieces, we have now a new position in which we have the bishop pair, we have now a pin, and the preparation to queenside castle and activate our rook. So that's why b6, queenside castling, bishop to e6, bishop to e2, now a5, and now bishop to c5. After b takes c5, I'm not going to show you now the whole game. The problem, I'm not going to answer that, sorry about that. The problem is now this weakened pawn structure. These are triple pawns. Really, every of these pawns is a serious weakness, so it's very easy for white to attack now. The main idea would be bishop to f3, rook to e1, and really white has a comfortable game. So let's see now our last example. Again, e4, e6, d3, d5, again queen to e2, very important move. After d takes e4, d takes e4, again e5, knight to f3, knight to d7, and now knight to d2. c6, again, this very important idea. And here, again, it's a game played by Alexander Morozevich. b3 with preparations to play bishop to b2, and then knight to c4, attacking really this weakness on e5. That's all possible because we have really this early activity of our pieces with the queen on e2, still with possibilities to play g3, bishop to g2, so this bishop still can be activated somehow. It's not that this bishop is really blocked out. Here in the game, queen to c7, bishop to b2, and now a5. Here, g3, we have knight to h6, we have bishop to h3. Again, I'm pointing you out, we would love really to give up our light square bishop for this light square bishop. This bishop could really come actively into the game, so this bishop to h3 is really sort of a positional pin. It's really a deep positional idea. Maybe I cannot explain you everything in this video by only analyzing one particular sideline of a French defense, but I've mentioned this many times in my Basics in Chess series videos. If you're familiar more with my YouTube chess channel, I'm always talking about this really tiny little positional ideas. Bishop to h3, a huge positional idea, I think, by Alexander Brozovic. Great positional play here by this top grandmaster. So f6, you see black further weakens the light squares. Here we have a4, creating a blocking system. Never allow, of course, to play the move b5 here. Bishop to b4, and now castling. Now it seems that black could maybe give up his dark square bishop for this knight on d2, but still then bishop to a3 again is a very good move. If, for instance, black give up the dark square bishop, then the bishop would still have a good activity, so this bishop again can be activated. In the game, castling was played, knight to c4, again this very important move, the same idea of this maneuvers, knight to e3 and then knight to f5 is our main strategical goal. Here we have knight to f7, knight to e1 with preparations to play knight to d3, of course, and now rook to e8. You see, you have to find now good maneuvers with the knight because the position is really static in the center. As I mentioned, no one wants to risk to play such a move like f5 or f4, because when you do that, for instance, if white does it, then after e takes f4, for instance, the e4 pawn could be really a weakness. So that's why it's not time here to push pawns in front of your king. It's really time to remaneuver pieces and find really the best squares on the board. So here bishop to f8, bishop to c3, b6 was played, bishop to d2, again remaneuvering moves, and now after knight to d6 we have knight takes, bishop takes d6, and now bishop to e3, finding another good diagonal here on the board, knight to f8, and now finally we got our goal. Our strategical goal, we traded off the light square bishops, rook takes c8, and now c3. Never allowed this bishop to maybe activate. Again, you see Morozevich has a position in which, again, the dark square bishop is blocked out by its own pawns. So here knight to e6, another problem, rook to b8. Here let's move a little bit faster, b4, a takes b4, and now knight takes b4, bishop takes, and now after c takes b4, we have a new position in which we have now the bishop against the knight. It seems like a drawish position, but still I would love to be white here, because we can always create here a pass pawn, and if this knight tries to jump on d4, it's this square d4 is perfectly covered by the bishop and the rook, so it will be very hard here for black to make some outposts with the knight. This f4 square, of course, is covered by this pawn on g3. So c5, we have rook to c1, c6, and now queen to a2. Very important move, pinning the knight, and so far not allowing this knight to jump on d4. King to h8, and now rook to d5. Again, we have a clear target. Again, I'm pointing out this d5 or f5 square. Now we are attacking this square with our rook, which is also perfectly fine to create outposts with your rook. Here, a rook to a8 was played, and now a5. What we want to do here is simply to create a pass pawn. If this pawn is on the a file or on the c file, it doesn't matter. When we play with the bishop against the knight, it's really time to create a pass pawn situation. So here, knight to c7 was played, again retreating with our rook. We have queen takes e4, not a problem, because here Morozevich found some tactics with queen to f7, attacking the knight. The knight has to retreat, and now we have finally our pass pawn with the b7 here, and very nice activity. Rook to d7. Now it's really time to maybe crack even the position here around this g7 square. In the game, queen to c6 was played, but now you see Morozevich found a great tactic. Again, black has to defend, and now rook to d1, activating now all of the pieces. You see how Morozevich has all of the pieces on the best squares in the game. Rook to f8, not a problem, because here bishop takes g7. You have to take with the knight, and now after sacrifice, it's a really, really bad position here for black, because everything needs to be covered, and now here Morozevich simply promoted to a queen, and it was game over. So maybe you can analyze the game, the whole game, with some stockfish engines. The games will be in the description below that I use. But as I said, this is our main goal after these trades of pawns in the center, d takes e4, e5, static center. So keep in mind outposts and positional trades of pieces of bishops. So I think it will be perfectly fine, because when you apply this system, it will be very easy for you to find the best next move to target the weak squares in your opponent's position. So as I said, don't make immediate mistake here, this knight to c3 move, because you will be probably pinned. So knight to d2, c3, knight to c4, knight to e3, maybe targeting again these squares. Again, this knight on f3 again would search for some other nice squares on the board. So I think this is really a good system to win against the French defense with this very nice King's Indian attack. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Meanwhile, you can watch my other videos so far from the series. Here is the link. And you can also watch my King's Indian and Nimzo Indian series, in which I show you an effective way how to play as a black against d4. And you can also subscribe to my channel if you like this content. Thank you for watching, guys, and chess is the best, of course.